because like when you think about the judgment it takes to say, okay, now's one of those times where it requires something extreme, there's that subjectivity. Like, how do you handle that aspect of it? Like the conviction that you do have, what allows you to feel like, I know I'm seeing this accurately enough. I know in a world that's so complex, and even virtue as a value, which is so complex because it's the makeup of a bunch of others, that I feel like, yes, this is one of those times to do something radical, or that I can feel so strongly about this belief. What allows for that for you?
And that is a really good question that I'm again going to give you a not terribly satisfactory answer toward, but maybe it would help if I gave you an example
Sure.
of arguments that take place within the broader conservative movement, even today. Because one of the things I find most fascinating about worldviews is when you dig into them, you'll find out that the most amazing arguments take place when the individuals that all believe the same thing are arguing with each other about a particular issue. One of those I call myself, for example, a moment ago, a Burkean conservative. Now, there's a lot of overlap here, but not entirely. There are other strands of conservatism, other intellectual traditions. Leo Strauss is a very famous one. He formed sort of a Straussian school. You might have heard of the Straussians. They splintered off in a dozen different directions. There's the East Coast, the West Coast. One of them was Harry Jaffa, who kind of had his own school. He was a direct disciple, if you will, of Leo Strauss, and he lived until his 90s. I think he died not that long ago. But he had a very lasting impact. And one of the things he taught very strongly was he centered American conservatism in a lot of ways within the Declaration of Independence and this notion of the rights that we have, inalienable rights endowed from our Creator, and specifically as it was voiced by Abraham Lincoln in the crisis of the Civil War. That Lincoln got it right? That it was up until that time, it was really the Constitution overshadowed the Declaration in a lot of ways, and Lincoln employed the Declaration in order to say, no, this is where we can philosophically and fundamentally and politically take our stand, say this is what's right, and we'll pursue this goal at an absolute crisis. And I think most conservatives, I would count myself as one of them, would say, yeah, the Civil War was one of those moments where extremity was appropriate, right? What else are we going to do? We're literally at war. The problem with that, if you fast forward to today, many, not all, but many of the followers of that Straussian, Joffian, if you will, school of thought are looking for a Lincoln-esque moment all the time. And would even say today that things are so bad that it's necessary for us to even vote for politicians that may be terrible individuals, but at least they're on our side. They're owning the libs. They're evoking liberal tears. And we might have in a previous age agreed why on earth are we mixing up with this? And they'll even, again, I want to stress here, not all Straussians. Yep. Some of them are even beginning to employ arguments like, well, the left has fought dirty all these years. What we need to do is we need to fight dirty also. And they'll even go so far as to try to join ranks with those like Mencius Moldbug or a Bronze Age pervert, individuals who are not conservative by any stretch, but are also so anti-left that they see that, well, maybe there's something to be gained from this. I don't agree with that. And I think, and you're right, it is subjective. At what point do you say this has gone too far? And I'm more a Burkean conservative. I'm much more reticent. Burke was pro-American revolution to a certain degree. He thought it would, and he said that as a member of the British Parliament, which is kind of unusual. I don't think he was for the war. He wasn't on our side necessarily, but he thought that ultimate separation was probably the right way to go. But then when the French rebelled, he did an almost 180. He said, this is wrong. What the French are doing is fundamentally overturning their society in the French Revolution. He saw us Americans were trying to reassert our rights as British citizens that were arbitrarily being taken from us by the British Crown, whereas what the French were doing was trying something so radical and extreme, it was destined to fail. That is and there are a lot of conservatives even of that era that would have disagreed with them. That is a subjective measurement. I don't feel like I'm giving a satisfactory answer. I guess I'm saying there are dangers on both sides, and it requires a lot of wisdom and a sort of recognition of both human nature and historically where we've come from, I think, to kind of guide us in a safer direction.
Yeah, it is a good answer because it's answering with, again, that nuance and complexity that it deserves, and it's acknowledging that, like, in a weird way, faith is involved in what you're explaining, because nobody can ever know for sure that it's 100% a moment that requires extreme action, or that this is the right course, or that this is wrong. but there's a faith in it that I believe that's the right thing, and we just kind of have to trust in that somewhat. Like you said, you have to have the prudence, you have to have the thoughtfulness, you have to challenge yourself, you have to think through it, but you'll never really know for sure. And I think that's accurate. What it makes me think too, as you're saying it, Josh, is like no matter where you sit on all this, right? Burke, anybody on any of these topics, to me, it kind of comes back to this very um fundamental question of what are we trying to get to, right? When we say when Burke says the French Revolution is fundamentally wrong, what makes it wrong? What is it that it either immediately like causes a problem with, or it sets in motion that will cause the problem? Like, what is it not allowing us to achieve that we should be achieving? Because in some ways, that's the guiding star. What is it that we
Mhm.
believe we need to get to? Is it? I'll put this out there, and you correct me. Through this thus far, it sounds like somewhat it's kind of like personal liberties and rights, right? Those inalienable rights that Lincoln spoke about. Is it that protecting those is the highest of all the goals and what we're working towards, or is it something else?